Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Wildcard. I'll be your host this week, Matt. You can follow me on Twitter at MattFFDynasty. And with me, as always, I have my two co-hosts. First up, we've got Ali, who you can follow on Twitter at FFDynastyGrill. How are you doing, Ali?
I'm really good, Matt. Actually, thank you. I've just about recovered my voice. Phil doesn't know.
Go on, Ali. Give him the good news.
We've just won the football or the soccer. We've finally beaten Germany, which is something that we've never done since 1966. So it's a day to celebrate for sure.
Yeah, always big news for us Brits when we can beat the Germans, and also we've got a second co-host, Kev, who you can follow on Twitter at Dynasty_Go. How are you doing, Kev?
Yeah, very good, thank you. Obviously, England won. It's coming home. I'm glad they did because otherwise we might have cancelled the show tonight. So very happy about that. But I'm glad we've got a show tonight. We've got an amazing guest coming on. So I've been on his show recently, so it's been nice to return the favour and get him on ours.
Absolutely. You've teed it up nicely, Kev, so we might as well introduce his guest tonight. He's the host of the Dynasty Drive podcast, the Big 12 Devy fantasy football writer at NFL Draft Bible, and contributor as well for Fantasy Intervention. We give a warm wildcard welcome to Anthony Corrente, who you can follow on Twitter at Dynasty Drive. Anthony, how you doing?
Good, guys. What's up? I'm glad the show didn't get canceled. I'm glad Germany didn't spoil our fun.
Absolutely. We can always come together, can't we, in cheering against the Germans. But yeah, it could definitely have gone either way. Luckily, we've got it going the right way, so I'm sure we're in store for a great show. So on today's show, we're going to get Anthony's thoughts on players that are currently undervalued and that he thinks are overvalued as well in Dynasty based off the current ADP. So we might as well get straight into it. Anthony, do you want to give us the first undervalued player?
Yeah, so the first guy, and thanks again for having me, guys. I'm excited to get into some of these players. I love talking undervalued, overvalued, because I feel like you always upset somebody somewhere. So I'm excited for whoever ends up in my mentions about whoever I'm wrong about. But the first guy that I wanted to talk about is Amari Cooper, wide receiver from the Dallas Cowboys. He's getting drafted right now as the wide receiver 17, 64th overall based on DLF Superflex ADP through the month of June. The biggest thing for me is Dallas is an explosive offense that I want multiple shares of. He still went over 1,100 receiving yards last year with the absolute mess at quarterback that they went through following Dak's injury. I think CeeDee Lamb definitely takes another step forward, and he's an elite option as well. But I think the passing offense will be big enough. I think there'll be enough to go around for multiple high-level wide receivers to be fantasy relevant. And he'll still only be 27. I feel like he gets thought about as an older guy since he's going into his 7th year. But he came in young. He's still in his prime. I really realized how much I liked Amari Cooper from this year moving forward a couple of weeks ago when I was making the case for why I thought he should be going ahead of Terry McLaurin, because I think that Terry McLaurin is a player that gets opposite of Amari Cooper thought of like he's much younger than he really is since he came in as an older prospect. Yeah. And that's when I really realized like, oh, I do love Amari Cooper this year and moving forward. I know he's had some volatility in the past and up and down, but I love the passing offense there. I think Dallas is going to score a ton of points. I think the defense is still not going to be very good. And I think there's going to be points aplenty for multiple wide receivers, but I like Cooper getting drafted as the wide receiver 17.
Yeah, and Cooper for me is exactly the type of player that I'm targeting as my wide receiver 1 or 2 with my draft strategy. So for me, I'm not really looking at wide receiver until round 6 or 7. So for me, Amari falls perfectly in my range. Just looking at his stats, he's only missed 3 games out of his 6 seasons so far, and he's finished as a wide receiver 2 in 5 out of the 6 seasons. So he's really consistent. And then last season recorded his highest reception total with 92, despite playing most of the season with backup quarterbacks. He also recorded his joint lowest touchdown receptions. He only scored 5. So you've got to expect positive regression in 2021. I think the offense as a whole is going to be awesome in 2021. And as you said, Anthony, the defense is still really bad. I think Dak's in with a serious shout of being the overall quarterback 1 in 2021 if he stays healthy. I know the Cowboys have an out on Amari Cooper's contract after the season, but I think realistically he's probably more likely going to be Michael Gallup leave out of the two of these.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil all the Amari Cooper love. I'm not totally on board with it. He's just a little bit too high for me.
It's going to be you in my mentions.
Me or one of my burner accounts. No, I think he's just a little bit too high for me. And I know that Ali and Matt are both big fans, so I'll sort of play devil's advocate and take that side a little bit. So it's only a little bit. I think he's slightly too high. I've got him wide receiver 20. It was wide receiver 10 in his only full season with Dak, but it was highly volatile in that season, 2019. He had 6 games where he had less than 10 points, and I do still hold it against him that he did cost me what would have been a championship in that season. So if only could have caught one pass against the Patriots, never mind. But yeah, I think looking at 2020, small sample size, obviously, it can be a little bit dangerous to extrapolate and predict that he would have kept that up. He did play 3 scrub cornerbacks in those 4 games, and also Jalen Ramsey was the other guy, but in that game he did split his time between him and Gallup. I think concerns for me would be the growth of CeeDee Lamb and getting Blake Jarwin back. And actually, the Cowboys in neutral game scripts, they were near the league average in passing. I know that me and Matt, we're in a fantasy wildcard league as co-owners, and we took him as wide receiver 22, combining with a Dak stack. So I think that makes players more appealing to me in all different types of fantasy as well. I don't think he's too far off, but there's guys like Evans, Higgins, Ayuk, and Sutton that I'd take over him going around that range. I think Evans and Sutton, possibly all 4 of these are cheaper than him, but I think a lot depends on your roster build as well. Obviously, he's got a crazy ceiling on any given week. I think if you've got a team like Cooper, Claypool, Lockett, that's a little bit too scary for me. I'm a bit of a wimp, so I think if you are taking Cooper, I'd like to have him with a legit top 10 option, or combine with some other safer guys, some floor plays, because I still personally think that volatility will exist. So just want to get your thoughts, Anthony, on what sort of wide receiver core you'd be looking to combine and build alongside Amari Cooper in your dynasty lineups, bearing in mind that he has been volatile in stretches during his career at Dallas.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think in an ideal world, he's my wide receiver 2. Like in an ideal world, if I can combine him with a guy that I view as a real top 10 option, I feel really, really good about that, because I think, he's got a top 12 sort of ceiling, but those kind of boom bust stretches as well. So I agree with that. Cooper, Claypool, Lockett, I would throw up every week. I would be riddled with nerves because I love them all, but that roller coaster is too wild for me to ride. So I think, like you said, if I could pair him with a guy that I viewed as a legit top 10 option, or came back around and paired him with some later on higher floor guys like Robert Woods, somebody like that I feel good about, being a consistent contributor. Maybe I won't get quite the same ceiling, but I'll be able to know I can put him out there every week. But I'd feel pretty bad if it was like Cooper's my wide receiver 1 and I come back around and end up with Tyler Lockett as my second guy. Like, oh no, that's too risky for even my blood.
Yeah, I have to say I love the pick, Anthony. I'm not going to let Kev throw any water on this Amari Cooper party. Like you mentioned, I just want any part of this Dallas offense, in all honesty. And Amari Cooper, he feels like great value with an ADP of wide receiver 17. He's somebody that, like I've mentioned, I'd be happy to get him as my wide receiver 1 in round 5. As we mentioned, we've seen the chemistry that he had with Dak Prescott at the start of last season. 51 targets in those first 4 games, which is just crazy numbers, and then 401 yards on top of that. So it was just absolutely tearing it up at the start of the season. It was just a shame that Dak went down, obviously put a little bit of derailed that a little bit, but on the whole, I just think next season, if they can carry on where they left off, Cooper's going to be fantastic, and I expect another big year from Cooper and the entire Dallas offense as a whole. So we'll move on then to the second player that you think is undervalued currently in Dynasty.
Yeah, the second guy that I feel is a little undervalued right now is David Montgomery, the running back from the Chicago Bears. He's getting drafted like the running back 22, 68th overall. And it feels like last year has almost had like a reverse effect. Instead of him coming off that big finish to the year and people kind of overreacting to that and getting valued super, super high, the price is, I think, fairly cheap for what his real range of outcomes is. I don't think it's realistic to project that, he's going to have a top 5 finish like last year. But I think running back 22 kind of feels like his floor to me. And I think it's more likely that he finishes like inside the top 16, like maybe top 12, and maybe in that like 14, 15, 16 kind of range. I'm not terribly worried about Tariq Cohen coming back. He's never had more than 99 carries in a season. I know that he'll take some of the receiving work, but I don't think the backfield becomes, a 50-50 timeshare. I just think that it's kind of weird. Everybody seemed to pump the brakes and was like, we're not going to react to David Montgomery beating up on the end of this schedule, which was soft. But now it's gone the total other way where it's like, oh, everybody's so far out on David Montgomery that I will take David Montgomery 68th overall. And if I can get him running back 22 or even a little bit, a smidge later than that, I'd be thrilled if I went heavy on running back early and he's my 3rd guy. I'm even happy if he's my 2nd guy, depending on the rest of my roster. Yeah,
I do agree with you in a sense that he had that superb finish last season, and I expected him to be going a lot higher than he is.
Mm-hmm.
But he just seems to have been faded too far. I think it's right about where I have him in my ADP, but I do appreciate that tier. I mean, we had our last show where we were doing a rankings debate, and it's really hard because they're all very similar guys, but you've just got to put someone down there. And I guess it's that perfect storm that we saw last season. That's why he's near the bottom of that tier. I think the schedule was really, really, really favourable for him. I think Tariq Cohen, there's concerns about pass catching. Will he get the 40-50 catches he got last season? I think it will reduce his catches, but I don't think we'll expect to see the numbers he had in his rookie season. And plus, he got top 5 volume as well. He's probably likely to get similar amount again, to be honest. Like you say, I don't think Tariq Cohen's going to come in on the floor. And Damian Williams, I mean, I can't really see him taking a lot away from him, being honest. But I think there's a few concerns. Obviously, the poor O-line, they lost the starting left tackle, Charles Leno, and they replaced him with a rookie that was projected to be a right tackle by many in the draft circle, Tevin Jenkins. Justin Fields is really intriguing. Russian QB is going to potentially see some positives and some negatives with that, but I'm sure we'll come on to that with someone else will elaborate on that in a moment. I don't want to steal their thunder. And then the other point on Montgomery, it's just thinking about the different strategies you've got in, whether you're approaching it as a startup or an existing league, in the sense that in a startup, I'm happy to take a cost. Whereas in an existing league, I think you struggle to get him at this cost, where you're likely having to pay up a little bit. And I seem to prefer guys such as Chris Carson because he is a little bit older, you get him cheaper, and I think both have got very similar outcomes over the next 2 years.
Yeah, for me, it's been a really strange one this offseason. It's really gone full circle in the space of a few months, I think. I was definitely selling Montgomery off the back of his running back 4 finish, but now the problem is I don't think you get the return. The return's just not enough, whereas it's viable to trade him. So for me, he's now a buy. The Chicago offense is mainly unchanged other than the rookie quarterback to come in later in the season. I think the Bears, they won 3 out of the 4 last games to end the season, which they then made the playoffs. And that was combined with the time that they gave Montgomery the rock. He averaged 22 rushing attempts and 105.5 yards per game, 7 touchdowns in the final 5 games. I know they were, on paper, they were easy opponents, and I'm also not saying that production is going to continue, but the opportunity is certainly going to be there for Montgomery. And if I'm able to get him as my RB3, I think that is amazing value. So I'm definitely all on board with this. So just a quick question for you, Anthony. With the incoming rookie quarterback, Justin Fields, do you think it will negatively impact Montgomery having a more mobile quarterback? Or do you think the offense as a whole takes a step forward, leading to more scoring opportunities for Montgomery?
I think that, and I like Justin Fields a pretty pretty good deal. So I think with Justin Fields coming in, it can do more to help Montgomery than hurt him. I think there's, the chance that Fields can run. He's a big, strong, fast guy for sure. And maybe he, we see a little bit of, like Cam vulturing people at the goal line or taking some of the rushing scores himself. But I think he's a good enough quarterback to help the offense enough overall that it only helps Montgomery's scoring opportunities in the long run and helps kind of open up that rushing game. We've seen before with plenty of guys that, the backside defensive end has to account for, a quarterback that can run. And maybe Montgomery sees a little bit more room than he has in the past with the, the Mitch Trubisky, Nick Foles kind of show that he's been part of. But yeah, I think I'm a big believer in Justin Fields. I think that he had no business going as late as he did in the draft. And I think he'll do a lot to help that offense overall and David Montgomery as well.
Yeah, I think if you're getting an upgrade at quarterback, the whole offense is going to upgrade, and that just actually equals more scoring opportunities. So I think you have to be happy that we're getting that improvement at quarterback. But I've just got to say, Anthony, I think you must have listened to his recent startup strategies, because I mentioned Amari Cooper as my wide receiver 1 round 5, and then right after it, I backed up with Montgomery round 6 as my RB3. So we're spot on with these two, Anthony. And I'm going to say I'm by no means a Montgomery truther at all, but I just think, as we mentioned, with that value that we've got now, it is just somebody that you've got to get at that price. I mean, we're talking about the 2020 RB4 going in the 6th round. I mean, will he finish that high again in 2021? Probably not. Did he have an easy stretch? Well, yeah, quite easy stretch. We've just mentioned the quality of opposition he faced, but you're just getting this young quarterback. He's only 24 years old. We know he's going to get that solid workload in 2021. And that's what it is. Opportunity is what you need at a running back and to get those fantasy points. And that's what he's going to be getting. So I think at an ADP of, is it RB22? It's an absolute smash for me. And with that, we'll move swiftly on to the third undervalued player that you've got, Anthony.
Look at Ali's face. Look at him.
I've tried to hold it off and maybe build up the suspense, because Ali's been looking forward to this one.
Yeah, I'll give you a guy that maybe you haven't heard of. Tom Brady, fellow named Tom Brady down in South Florida. Tom Brady, the GOAT, he's getting drafted. And I'm a Jets fan. It kills me to say that. Getting drafted as the quarterback 23, 66 overall in Superflex ADP. I can't even believe that we're still at the point where I have to point out that Tom Brady's a value. But here we are again. He had his best passing yardage total in 2020 since 2015. History has shown before that the second year in a Bruce Arians offense is going to be arrow up compared to the first year. Everybody's back. Tampa is poised to run the whole thing back, make another run at it. I know that the window for him is undeniably shorter than other quarterbacks, especially in that range and even a little bit earlier. But he's going around guys like Carson Wentz, Daniel Jones. I'm smash drafting Tom Brady over those guys a million times out of a million. In a startup, more often than not, I'm looking to win year one. I'm not typically one to try and, punt year one and, take more, trade back, accumulate more rookie draft capital and take the long build. It's a fine strategy, but if I'm doing a startup, I want to try and win as fast as possible. And I think if that's the route that you want to go, you've got a legit probably 2, maybe I don't even want to put time on it, because I've been saying you got a 2-year window with Brady for what feels like 5 years, but you've got a legit 2-year window. If you can have Brady as your quarterback 2 in Superflex, that's stealing at quarterback 23 prices. I mean, I think he has a legit chance to throw over 40 touchdowns again. And I think, we're going to see him throw for close to 5,000 passing yards, and he's getting drafted as the quarterback 23. It's crazy that this is where we are. I know he's old, but this is one where I'll take the short window and try and win a championship with Tom down in Tampa Bay as my QB2.
Well, Anthony, it's definitely going to be a popular one with me. I honestly, how dare the GOAT be this undervalued is crazy. I've thrown a few quid on Brady to be the MVP this year at 18-1. So I think it's quite realistic. What he achieved last year, I don't think it's been spoken about enough. In a COVID hit season on a brand new team after 20 years of being in the same offense with no preseason. And at 43 years of age, the guy was still reading plays off his arm in the Super Bowl. So that just shows you how much off the cuff he was playing. as you mentioned, the year 2 in Bruce Arians' offense has always been highly successful. So I think 2021 is going to be a special year for Brady. He's also got some, in commas, new weapons. He's got AB for a whole season now. He knows the offense. He was really hitting his stride the last part of last season. He's got Gio Bernard, who's a really good pass catching back, which is good because Ronald Jones and Fournette just can't catch the ball to save their lives. And he's also got AJ Howard. He was Brady's favourite target when he first got there. So as you can tell, I'm a bit excited about it. I think you're going to get 2 more seasons with Brady, and what you're going to get is a top 10 season both seasons. He had 40 touchdowns last season, and I'm going to bet for 45 to 50 touchdowns in 2021. So for what little you've got to give up to get him, I think it's the highest of the century.
Yeah, I think 18-1 is a great price on MVP. I know you know that I like a punt, so I might have to get on that. I think essentially, just talking about betting, I think MVP, you just want a QB on a team that's going to win a lot of games, and with the Bucs being second favourites to win it all, 18-1 to steal really should be second favourite behind Mahomes if you just sort of directly correlating it with that. I know you guys call him the GOAT. I'm going to call him the LOAT, which is the luckiest of all time. Just bumping the brakes a little. I'm going to probably offend Anthony here. I'm going to bag on his Jets a bit. Obviously, Brady spent all his career in the AFC East, which was a dump, and then he gets out just as the Bills are turning into a contending team. He managed to get out and move to the NFC South, and then suddenly Drew Brees is not there anymore, and Julio's gone, and Sam Darnold is competition. So I'm jesting. He's the greatest of all time. I'm just giving a different spin on it, and he's got a fantastic situation. Like I said, the Bucs are running back full 22 starters. The O-line's elite. His weapons are amazing. He's got that strong defense as well. But yeah, I think he is an undervalue for me. I'm completely on board with this. I'm obviously not as high as Ali. That's he's got him as his QB1, I think. But yeah, he's a back end QB2 you're drafting, and he's going to perform as a QB1 while he's in the league. I'm only working on 2-year windows in Dynasty anyway. I think the only caveat to him being a buy is that try to acquire him from an existing team, and I think it's really tricky to get him just because of the name value and the fact that he is so consistent and he's in that great situation. So sort of the weapons he's got, Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, Gronk, Ronald Jones. I just want to get your thoughts if you are stacking Tom Brady, because obviously stacking's amazing. With another Bucs player in Dynasty, who would you prefer target to stack him with?
I think it's still Mike Evans for me. I feel like he just has kind of been sort of like criminally underappreciated throughout his career, but he's still a top 15 wide receiver for me in Dynasty. I still think Mike Evans is going to perform pretty consistently. He's going to be a beast in the red zone, and I think yardage is going to be there for all these guys. Like, I think Evans and Godwin are going to both have catches, going to have yards, and I think Antonio Brown to an extent as well. I think those 3 guys are all going to be fairly consistently involved, but from a Dynasty perspective, I'll take Evans.
And I think as well in Dynasty, beyond this season, you can only sort of predict that Evans is going to definitely be there. Antonio Brown's on a year deal, I think, and Chris Godwin's on the tag. So
yeah, I wonder what happens with Godwin. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, I guess if you're looking to do a stack in a startup, then what's the point of doing it for 1 year? Yeah, and Godwin is interesting. Yeah.
No, you make a great point there, Kev. I think, Ali, I don't want to say it, but there's every chance I think that as soon as Brady hangs it up, I just think the Buccaneers just start all over again and start rebuilding. So just enjoy it while it lasts. That's all I'm saying. But now going back to Brady and Dynasty, I do really struggle to put a value on him. I mean, yes, obviously he is the greatest quarterback to ever play in the NFL. The 2020 season that he had was unreal. But we did mention it. It's the age thing that I still struggle with. I know 43 years old. I struggled to pick up running backs that are over 25 now. I'm about a 43-year-old, so it's always tough for me to pull the trigger on a quarterback at that age. But you've just mentioned that value of a QB 23, and it's just constantly a low-end QB1, high-end QB2. It makes sense to make the pick. He's extremely safe. He's got such a safe floor, but I do think that upside's probably a little bit limited. I think he's got to play lights out every year to be that QB, low end QB1. But he is Tom Brady, and he can do that. So if you are drafting him, I'm probably not excited to draft him. Ali, I know you would be excited to get him, but me personally, he's not somebody I'm super excited to get. And if you do draft him, you kind of committing to just having him until he retires, basically, because I don't think you're going to be able to sell him for the value that he deserves. But like you said at the top, Anthony, I think you're just hoping that every time it gets to the off season, you're just thinking, just one more year, Tom. Just give me one more year.
Yeah,
and you never know, it could be playing for the next 5 years the way he keeps going. So yeah, he's definitely somebody that I think you need to be targeting. And as a QB2, he's ideal because he's safe, and then you can connect him with one of these high end QBs that have got that elite upside. And so before we move on to the second half of the show, I'm just going to give a quick shout out to his sponsor. JA3 Apparel is the leading supplier of bespoke teamwear, including podcasts, sports clubs, universities and schools. Choose from JA3's own bespoke range, modified designs, or customize your own from scratch. We at the Fantasy Wildcard have his very own merchandise store, bringing you our fantastic logo branded across several quality items, including hoodies, hats, jackets, t-shirts and shorts, plus many more. So be sure to check out JA3 Apparel on Twitter at ApparelJA3, and their website, I believe, launches next week. So keep your eyes out for that, and thank you once again. So with that, we're going to swiftly move on to the second half of the show. Now we're moving on to the guys that you think are overvalued, Anthony, in Dynasty. So we'll start with your first player.
Make people mad.
This is it. This is where it starts getting tasty now. So who's the first guy that you think's overvalued currently in Dynasty?
The first guy I thought was overvalued last year, so I'm going to keep calling him overvalued. So things find out where they really land. But it's Derrick Henry, running back, Tennessee Titans. He's getting drafted as the RB7, and nothing about that feels good to me. He's getting drafted. He's coming off the board 19th overall, and he will be great for this year in all likelihood. My problem with selecting Derrick Henry is it's like buying a used car. Like the value is it's only going down. Like it's never going to appreciate. It's only going to go down in value, right? So as good as he is, and as good as last season was, and 2,000 yards, except we know all the accolades. But I was selling him a year ago because I would rather get out too early than too late, right? Like philosophically, I don't want to be trading for or really drafting second contract running backs at this price in Dynasty. It's just not how a sustainable winner is built. The shelf life is too short, and I know he's a bit of an anomaly as a player from a physical standpoint. I get all of that. But again, I would rather just be out from underneath it too early than too late. I don't see how he ever returns the value that you're going to pay to draft him in a trade. As if you're selecting him as RB7, you're never going to get that value back. Cam Akers, DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris are all getting drafted after him. I'd rather have all three than him at the RB7. I just think it's something where we've probably seen the peak. We're never going to see it again. And I have a really, really tough time paying that premium price for that sort of situation.
Yeah, I absolutely love this shout, Anthony. Running back 7 in startups, a massive overvalue for me. I've got him, wait for it, running back 19.
Yeah, they're coming for you, not for me.
Yeah, I mean, each 27 season, it's pretty much downhill, isn't it? And it can be, as we've seen, it can be a really steep decline. I think the fact that he's had a clean injury history, apart from one game he missed with an hamstring injury in 2019, some people see that as a positive. But with running back, you're always at a risk of getting an injury, and if you've not had one for a while, well, it's coming for you, isn't it? Really, it's. Not putting any like voodoo magic or any spells on him, but he's due an injury, and I think this could be the year. I genuinely think he's only got one running back one season left in him at best. So taking him in Dynasty, it's a no for me. I think we've seen the cliff come fast with guys that have been top running backs like Gurley and Lev Bell. I think there's other concerns of changing the OC from Arthur Smith. If you think back to before Arthur Smith, when Matt LaFleur was there, he didn't use Henry properly. He kind of got lucky throwing him in a game against the Jags where he absolutely bullied him and knocked me out of the playoffs. Cheers, Derek. But yeah, it's like continued lack of pass usage as well. He's never had 20 catches in a season. I've got no issue with rostering him in an existing league if you're a contender, because you're not going to be able to get that same level of production from what you're getting back for him. But I think in startups, you've got to think beyond 1 year. You mentioned Akers and Swift. There's also Gibson that's going behind him, which they're guys at 22, 23 years old, getting 4 years start on them. We've just got to remember, it's not redraft, is it? We're talking dynasty, so you've got to be thinking about the bigger picture. So I think, yeah, this is a big overvalue. But I do think if you're a contender, you're going to really struggle to sell him. He's on your roster till he's done.
Yeah, for me, this really is your last chance to jump ship this off season. I just can't believe that he's still going as the RB7 in Dynasty. I think we've got redraft heads on. He's my RB12. I'm certainly the highest of the three of us, but I may need to adjust that. I think it's probably a little bit too high.
Yes! Come in home.
I have Henry in just one of my teams. I think I've got about 20 Dynasty teams, and I cannot shift him for anything in this league, so I'm just going to have to hold on to him. My strategy is going to be that I'm going to hold on and try and trade him in season after a monster game, which is usually against Houston. Usually has about 250 yards, so I'll try and wait for that game. I do think that Henry has the potential to break records this season with the extra game. I think the arrival of Julio opens up the middle of the field even more. And they're still going to be run first, with Tannehill being super efficient as he is. But yeah, I just can't believe it. He's the RB7. In truth, there's at least 6 or 7 guys I've got ranked as the RB7 onwards, and I'd much rather them over Henry in Dynasty. So a quick question back to you, Anthony. If you did own Henry, what would you be looking for in return to trade Derrick Henry away this offseason?
I mean, I guess something's worth whatever somebody's willing to pay, right? That's the interesting question. I'd honestly probably come close to like borderline, quote unquote, selling low, just because I don't know how much better it's going to get from here. Like, I think a year ago, if you told somebody that you were going to trade Derrick Henry for like a presumed late first plus a player, they would probably scoff at that. But I'd strongly consider that. Like, I think anything a first plus I'm considering at this point, because I think like Kev said, I think the cliff could come quick. I don't think it'll be like a slow, graceful decline for Henry. I think when it comes, it's going to be over. Like you said about Gurley. Gurley's the oldest 26-year-old man on the planet. Like, nobody, you know what I mean? He went from superstar to complete afterthought. And I know it's not the total same situation, but I think anything a first plus leaves me strongly considering moving him.
Yeah, I don't know if you feel the same, Anthony, but for me, running back is equally the best position in fantasy football, but just equally the worst position, because,
100%.
as I just mentioned, you just don't know when that cliff's gonna arrive. I mean, it's great when you've got all these running backs putting up numbers, but then a year's time, you could lose half of those running backs with just how quickly it changes. We've said it a few times, but I'm going to say it one more time. RB7, that is absolutely crazy for current value. I'm not going to go anywhere near him at that price. We've just mentioned it. He's quite a funny one though, because he's seemingly overvalued in startups, but then once you get into your leagues and you actually have him on your roster, it's basically impossible to sell. You're never going to get the value you deserve. So like Kev said, if you've got him, you've just got to keep riding him and hoping he keeps putting up the numbers, because you're not going to get the value back. You might as well, if you're in a position to contend, you might as well just keep hold of him and hope it keeps going. I think you'd have to go to maybe round 4 in a start for me to even consider taking him. But as we just mentioned, with the current ADP, he's never going to be there in round 4. And even then, if he fell to me round 4, I'd still be not 100% confident in pulling the trigger. Kev mentioned the passing work is obviously another concern, just to add on top of all the rest that we spoke about. So yeah, I'm not confident at all in picking him up. And if you do have him, you've just got to keep riding him, I think. So we'll move on to the second player then. I've just seen it on the show sheet. I know this is going to be another one that we absolutely love. So who's the second overvalued player you've got, Anthony?
The second guy that I have is Jalen Hurts, quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think he's a fine redraft target. I think he is. It's fine to go after him for the rushing floor. I totally get targeting him late in redraft, but his price in Dynasty right now is confusing to me. He's getting drafted like as the quarterback 13, 32nd overall off the board. And he's being drafted as the QB 13. And in my eyes, there's no certainty he's locked in as the starter for longer than this season. Like, I think this year he gets his shot, but I mean, it could go horribly wrong. And for that kind of scenario in and of itself, that's not a price that I'm willing to pay. I mean, Tua Tagovailoa is going after him. Baker's going after him. Ryan Tannehill's going after him. Deshaun Watson's going after him. And I know that situation is, a mess off the field right now as well. But I don't know. It feels like paying for a player's ceiling that he may never realize. And it's not a risk that I'm willing to take in a startup. He's going off the board in a range of a lot of elite options at other positions. Calvin Ridley, CeeDee Lamb, Antonio Gibson. If it's a weird spot for quarterback, right? Because at QB 13, maybe you went one earlier than that. Like maybe you already have one quarterback on your roster and you're looking to double down fast and get your second guy. If that's the case, I'd rather punt it, wait a little bit, and come back around with a guy like Baker or Tannehill. Or you've faded the position in round one and you're looking for a starter, in which case I'd still rather wait a little bit and have a guy that I feel a little bit better about the long-term future of. Sure, maybe Baker Mayfield doesn't have the rushing upside or the tantalizing ceiling that Jalen Hurts could have, but I'm just not sold at that price. If it was he was getting drafted where we said Brady was getting drafted, quarterback 23 or whatever, that's a much more palatable discussion for me to have. But at QB 13, that's a player that's getting drafted like it's set in stone that he's going to be the starting quarterback there for years to come, and I can't get on board with that.
Yeah, well, we're actually massive Hurts fans now. I'm only joking. Yeah, absolutely. You're talking our language, Anthony. I do have a personal affection for Hurts actually because he helped me win a big league last season. But sentiments aside, I'm definitely out on Hurts in Dynasty. I haven't got any shares of him. There's certainly many quarterbacks with later ADP, and a lot of them you've just named that I'd rather choose over Hurts in a heartbeat. So Watson, Stafford, Tua, Baker, Tannehill. They're all ranked lower, but I'd definitely rather have them. The job security is the biggest issue for me. I think we're all looking for that next sexy Russian quarterback. So a lot of people go, "Oh, that's Hurts," but we saw his problems last season with accuracy. And then you take the fact the Eagles could struggle again this year, and then they've got great draft capital in 2022. So my fear is if Hurts doesn't step it up this year, then they're going to replace him in the draft. So he's too boom or bust for me. I think this time next year, he's either going to be a QB1 or he's going to be a QB none.
Yeah. I don't know where Kev's gone. Kev's decided to drop out, but he must have not wanted to badmouth. He's an Eagle fan, Anthony, so he must not wanted to badmouth his quarterback.
Yeah, I guess not. I respect it.
I'm sure he'll come back once we move on to the next player. No, I'm completely in agreement with this one. I mentioned it at the top. I'm definitely out on Jalen Hurts. I mean, you've mentioned it. There's no denying that he's going to have a really solid 2021 season. You can base that just purely on his rushing ability alone. We don't even have to talk about how he can throw the ball. Just on rushing, it can have a really solid year as a quarterback. It's the long-term situation that you mentioned. That is the big concern. I did mention on last week's show that the only hope you do have if you do draft him is that maybe the Eagles, he managed to put up an average performance and the Eagles may be pushing for the playoffs. And then they miss out on quarterback, or they decide to address other needs at quarterback, because we know that the class next year, it's not the strongest class. So I think there's every chance that if he does maybe have an okay season, they maybe give him just that one more year, use the picks on other areas that they need to improve. Obviously, we know the Eagles, they're struggling at the minute all over the roster. So that's just maybe one. If you try to find that little bit of hope, that's what I'm giving you. Maybe they'll just give him that extra year. with the quality of the quarterback class. But yeah, either way, Hurts is definitely not somebody that I'm looking to target in Dynasty. I'll throw Kev's question to you, Anthony, because I know he'll want to know your feelings on Hurts. If you have Hurts on a contending team, can you trade him away with the high likelihood you're not going to get a better 2021 fantasy quarterback in return? And what deal can you do in this event?
I think you can, because I think if you're on a contending team, the likelihood is that Hurts was probably like found money, right? Like he was probably a late enough pick in rookie drafts that you were probably either set or had enough good going on at the quarterback position that it wasn't like you were drafting Hurts and hoping, he's my guy that I'm going to, base this team around. So yeah, I think if you're not getting a better or projected better quarterback for him than him this season, you could definitely do a deal. I mean, because like we're talking about right now, somebody's going to be willing to pay for him, whether that's in a startup or a trade. And, quarterback prices are skewed in trades all the time in Superflex, but somebody's going to be needy enough that if you're not a believer, I think you can sell him and get a good enough return. I would consider selling him if I wasn't getting a quarterback back in return, because I'm not a real huge believer long-term. It's too risky for me. And I think this could be like, I sort of hate like sell high because we say it about every player, but I think this really could be sell high. Like, I don't know that he ever gets back to the value that we're seeing right now. So if you can flip him for a huge package of picks, or, a decent package of picks and another position player, whether that's running back, wide receiver, wherever you're weak, I think you can definitely deal him off. Hey, you're back. We're still bashing Hurts.
And now he's frozen.
I know, it's funny.
That's a perfect freeze frame, though. I thought he was just staying still at first. But yeah, I think you could definitely flip him without getting a quarterback in return, or getting a better quarterback than him in return.
Yeah. So would you go on, Alice? Go on. Yeah, you carry on.
He's just been involved in the trade in one of my leagues, and the guy got Tannehill in a second in return for Hurts, which I thought was a bit of a robbery.
Yeah,
I'd absolutely do that deal.
Yeah, absolutely, I would do that deal.
Yeah, if you're getting any kind of established quarterback, I think you've got to do it, haven't you, really? Because we just mentioned that there's every likelihood that he's not even in a starting position after this season. So, yeah, fully agree with that one. Kev is obviously too distraught to talk about his quarterback. So we're going to move on to the third player that you think is currently overvalued in Dynasty.
Sure. My third guy is Adam Thielen, wide receiver from Minnesota Vikings. He's getting drafted like the wide receiver 22, 73rd overall. And I am not content to pay back-end wide receiver 2 prices for massive touchdown numbers that are likely to regress. I think he is a fine player, but the consistency is not going to be there moving forward. His season last year was not 2018, where he had 153 targets. I mean, he had 108 targets last year and just an unsustainable amount of touchdowns. He had 14 touchdowns. He's never had double-digit touchdowns any other time in his season, and it's just too crazy to try and project that he's going to do that again. The receiving market share, yardage, receptions on a run-heavy team runs through Justin Jefferson. I think Adam Thielen is going to be a good player for the Minnesota Vikings. I think he, despite being 31 or going into his age 31 season, is still going to be a good, reliable, consistent player for the Vikings. But I think he'll be a better player from an NFL perspective than a fantasy perspective. I just think that offense runs through Dalvin Cook and now Justin Jefferson. I have him ranked. I know that I saw Kev had him ranked as the wide receiver 35. I have him ranked only one spot ahead of that, wide receiver 34. And frankly, I feel like that's even a little rich. Like, I have been tweaking stuff and it could come down a little from there. I just don't see any way that the volume or target share is there to balance out the likely regression in touchdown numbers for him to kind of provide value at that price, getting drafted like the wide receiver 22.
Yeah, you just said it just then. He was Mr. Efficient in 2020 with them 14 touchdowns in just 74 receptions. That's a touchdown for every 5.2 passes he caught, which is definitely unsustainable to say the least going forward. Easily his best ever return. His last highest was 9 in 2018. So he's definitely a screaming sell for me if you can. I've just got doubts on whether you're going to get enough in return for him, probably because of his age. He's my wide receiver 39, so I'm even lower on him than you. I am shocked that he's still going as wide receiver 22. Again, I think people have probably got their redraft heads on, so they play into their stats a bit. And the general consensus in the leagues that I'm involved in is that nobody wants to pay to get him. I think the reason being is the shiny new toy, Justin Jefferson, who many people have him as their dynasty wide receiver 1. With his record rookie season in 2020, I think his outlook is huge. If I've got Thielen right now, I'm obviously looking to sell, but if not, I'm holding. I think he's got pretty big cap hits in 2021 and 22, so you're safe with him for 2 years. But I think it falls in line with his drop off. He's going to be 33 by then, so the production is just not going to be there. And then who knows what the quarterback situation is going to look like. So just a quick question back to you, Anthony. Thielen had twice as many touchdowns as Jefferson did last season, 14-7. Are you expecting their numbers to flip this season, or do you think that Thielen is still the main red zone weapon?
I think it flips. I think Justin Jefferson is good enough across the board that if I was going to project one of them for double-digit touchdowns or predict one of them for double-digit touchdowns, it's Jefferson. I think Thielen kind of regresses to where he's always been in his career as a 4, 5, 6 kind of touchdown a year guy. So yeah, I think seeing them flip would be the way I would see it shake out. If Jefferson has 14, there'll be a lot of us dancing in the streets because I'm sure that he will have 13 or 1,400 yards to go with it, and we'll all be quite happy. But yeah, of the two, I think the higher touchdown numbers go to Justin Jefferson this year.
Yeah, well, we've just been speaking about everyone's got him in the rankings. I've got him wide receiver 45, so I think it's safe to say that I definitely agree with this take, Anthony. As we've mentioned, he's hugely dependent on those touchdowns last year, and there's not a world where I don't see Jefferson or even Irv Smith as well taking that step forward and becoming more dominant in the red zone and taking those touchdowns and those looks away from Adam Thielen. We just mentioned his age as well, 31. Coming up to this season, he's on a run-heavy offense. I just don't see the appeal at all in taking him as the wide receiver 22 in a startup. There's nothing about the situation that where he is at the stage of his career. There's just nothing that would make me think I'd want to select this guy as the wide receiver 22 in my startups. If anything, I'd want him maybe as my wide receiver 3, ideally wide receiver 4 if possible. But we've just mentioned with that ADP. Is going in around round 7 in Superflex leagues. You're just not going to be able to get him, and especially not me, the way that I target my startup and the strategies I use. I'm not going to be able to get my wide receiver 4 in round 7. So, yeah, he's definitely a guy that I'm not going to be targeting. And we've got Kev back.
We think.
Yeah, no, you've not.
All right, let's go
frozen.
back to Jalen Hurts.
Right, let's pan him. Ding, round 2.
We thought you might not want to say anything bad about your quarterback, Kev. I thought you just wanted to try and skip that one.
I'm sure we've covered Hurts, how he's just horrible and he's going to get replaced. I'm sure that's all we've spoke about. So.
Yeah, you don't need to hear what we said because that basically sums it up.
Yeah, that's a pretty good synopsis. Yeah.
I tried to give a little bit of hope that maybe we can get one more year out of him, but yeah, we're definitely all out on Hurts, I think. Do you want to give your feelings on Thielen while you're here, Kev?
My Adam feelings. Oh, terrible. Yeah, I'm probably the biggest fan out of us 3 on Thielen. I'm the highest on him, but he's my wide receiver 35, whereas he's going as wide receiver 22. It feels like a mistake. Maybe DLF have got their figures wrong. Maybe not, but yeah, there's loads of guys I'd take over him. He's usually a target of mine as a wide receiver 3-4, not a wide receiver 2. 14 touchdowns was wild last season. That was 40% of Kirk Cousins' 35 touchdowns. And he's never had 10 before last season. So basically, there's a 0% chance that he's a top 10 wide receiver in 2021 in my eyes. I think if you can get wide receiver 22 values, absolutely sell him. Sell him so fast. Don't even think about it.
No, absolutely. So I think
one other thing as well. Actually, one other thing.
Go on, then, Kev.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts sucks.
So that brings us to the end of that section. I mean, what did we have? 6 players there. I think everyone we pretty much agreed with. So your mentions look to be safe for now, Anthony, especially from us 3 at least. Anyway, we'll have to see if anybody disagrees. But we'll move on to the next part of the show, which is the fantasy wildcard section. So this is where we get as guests to pick one player that they believe will be their fantasy wildcard. So a guy that's going to improve their dynasty value the most in 2021. So who's your wild card pick, Anthony? Who have you got?
It's Jerry Jeudy. I feel like I have been pounding the table for Jerry Jeudy long and often this offseason. He's getting drafted like the wide receiver 31 right now. Wide receiver 31.
And Thielen's wide receiver 22.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy.
It's nuts to me that I think everybody overreacted. Maybe that's not the right word, but really, really clung to and flipped out over the drop numbers last year for Jerry Jeudy. And I think what a real wider lens is that we also got really spoiled with Justin Jefferson last year and some really kind of anomaly sort of rookie wide receiver seasons as of late that, 900 yards receiving in a rookie year used to not be bad, but now it's Jerry Jeudy's a bust and he drops the football. And he only had, I don't have it right in front of me, but I think he had one more drop than CeeDee Lamb. And I think maybe 1 or 2 more than guys like DK Metcalf. And there's been a long list of wide receivers before Jerry Jeudy and that will come after Jerry Jeudy that were elite, that had high drop rates. I'm more concerned with the fact that he is an elite route runner. He can create separation. Drops, part of football, not ideal, but enough targets and enough volume, and his ability to create separation outweigh all of that, in my opinion. He last year, and the quarterback situation is not great. I mean, last year, Drew Lock, I'm not a fan, is the kindest way I could put it. I don't think he's very good at football, is how I feel about Drew Lock.
Fair. That's fair.
I don't think Drew Lock makes it to the field as the starter, barring an injury this year. I think Teddy is the starter. And do I think Teddy's great? No, I don't think Teddy's great, but I think he's much better than Drew Lock. And we just watched Teddy sustain multiple 1,000-yard receivers in Carolina a year ago, despite not being a great quarterback. I think it's likely that Jeudy, I would say likely. I think it's likely Jeudy goes over 1,000 yards this year. And everybody kind of comes back to where a lot of us saw him pre-draft. I think in the not so distant future, there's a world where Jeudy gets valued in that wide receiver 14 to 16 range. Yeah. I think he's an elite player. I think he was an elite player in college. And I think the quarterback situation will get better. Teddy's not the answer long-term. Drew Lock's not the answer long-term. Whether they trade for a guy, whether they should have drafted Justin Fields this past year. That's what should have happened. Yeah, but they were on the clock. I was literally banging on the desk, please, for all of my Jerry Jeudy shares, please draft Justin Fields. But even still, as not exciting as Teddy Two Gloves is for fantasy football, we just saw Robbie Anderson go over 1,000 yards for the first time in a season. We just saw DJ Moore still get missed quite a lot and not really, do the things we all hope for, but still go over 1,000 yards. I think Jerry Jeudy boosts his stock in a big way. I don't think he's getting drafted like the wide receiver 31 this time next year. I think it's way more likely it's in the teens or in the high 20s.
Yeah, I'm really involved with this pick. I feel like I've been writing about him being a buying dynasty for about the past 6 months. He's got great draft capital. We've selected 15th overall. We love his route running ability. I think it's going to shine through in 2021. There was a big 2020 rookie draft debate. Did you select CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Jeudy? But if you selected Lamb, you're obviously not happy at the minute. Just look at their values, what they are now. The quarterback situation worries me as well. I'm not a fan of Drew Lock at all. But the time is now to buy Jerry Jeudy. Good wide receivers. They generally have long careers. So buy him now while his value is probably the lowest it'll ever be. I'm hoping as well that it's Teddy Bridgewater that wins the job. He supported 3 top 25 wide receivers last season in Carolina. And then you got the golden carrot at the end of the proverbial stick, which is Aaron Rodgers. If someone like that ends up in Denver, then it just improves the quarterback situation immensely, and the stock of all these wide receivers is just going to rise incredibly. So just a quick question back to you, Anthony. How big a concern is the quarterback situation in Denver, whether it's Locke or Teddy Bridgewater? Do you think the investment is going to be worth it now if they do end up with someone like Rodgers down the line?
I think the investment's worth it because I don't think there's any way the quarterback play could be worse than it was last year. Judy was 6th in air yards, 2nd in unrealized air yards last year. Drew Lock was not accurate with the football at all, the same way he's been for his entire professional and collegiate career. So I think Teddy's an upgrade, and that helps Judy in the short term. If something happens where Aaron Rodgers ends up on the Denver Broncos, you will find me like cartoon Scrooge McDuck, like swimming through gold coins with all of the Jerry Jeudy shares I've accumulated over the last year when everybody else tried to say he was a bust and he wasn't good and he was a bad value. No, I think that the arrow is pointing up on Jeudy. I think a lot of this past year is an overreaction, and I know it wasn't, a superstar season, but it was a better rookie season than it's getting credit for. But I think it's just getting overshadowed by the fact that Jefferson went off, Lamb looked great and would have been better if not for the Dak injury. But Judy's going to be fine down the line, and I think it's an investment that is worth making now before the price goes up.
Yeah, I know you're a big fan, Anthony. When I was on Dynasty Drive with yourself, you highlighted Judy as a guy that you was in on, and you're still in on him, which is great. Big fan of this selection. I do prefer Sutton outright, but I think at the cost, it's probably a very similar decision, really, where you're happy taking either. I like as well the fact that for the wildcard selection, you've taken a guy that's actually got room to grow as well. The fact that he's going so low, the idea of the wildcard is picking someone that's going to jump the most, so that gives him more scope to really make that jump. So a cracking selection there. I think the Broncos, it's an offense I'm targeting as a whole. I think, not Drew Lock, but but yeah, I think as a whole, it's an offense I'm really interested in. I love Javonte Williams. I think Noah Fant can still be something decent. Maybe not Kyle Pitts level, but yeah, I think he can still have a quality career. And they're due to get a QB upgrade in time as well, so you're getting him now at this cost. And that's not even factoring in the likelihood that it's going to be someone better. And like you said, I wish it were Justin Fields. I can't believe that. I can't believe they blew it. And I can't. Both them and the Panthers, really. It's just such bad decision making. Last season, Judy was 6th in air yards, 7th in deep targets, and 2nd in unrealized air yards. So there are people saying Teddy Bridgewater is a concern, but actually he was QB 13 in deep completion percentage and 1st in an accuracy rating. So while I do agree he's not the franchise QB, he is a bridge quarterback. I think that he can certainly help Judy this season. And yeah, you mentioned the minor issues with his drops. People don't speak about CeeDee Lamb, so I'm on board with that. And obviously Judy is part of that wide receiver factory. They've got Alabama, so I just want to know where he sits in your dynasty rankings versus the Alabama rookie wide receivers, Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. Plus, what percentage do you think it is that he's better than Sutton in dynasty long term?
I'm a Judy over Sutton guy, so I do like Judy more than Sutton, but it's close. Let me look where I have them real quick. I know they're not far off. I only have them they're like 4 spots apart from each other, so I have them both right now as top 28 guys. To the Alabama rookies, I would have it Judy, Waddle, Smith, but they're all close. I like it. And I feel like I had to qualify all offseason too. It's not like I don't hate Devontae Smith, but I love Jalen Waddle.
Do you like him more than DJ Chark?
Jalen Waddle over DJ Chark?
Yeah.
Yeah. Long term, I do.
This is an inside joke because Kev has chart one spot higher in his dynasty rankings than Waddle, so we absolutely tore him apart in last week's show. So it's just, I think he's just trying to look for any kind of something to make him feel better about himself.
It's not as bad as the make out, honestly. It's all to do with process. It's because I've got Terrace Marshall. I'm so high on
we
Terrace
don't need
Marshall.
to know your excuses, Kev.
Yeah, whatever.
So that's another Eagles player that we've bashed now. We've done Hurts and
I love it.
Smith as well.
I love it.
But no, I think it's definitely an interesting pick as your wildcard selection, because now we've had both Denver wide receivers selected in this part. We had Dave Wright on about a month ago, and he picked Colton Sutton as his wildcard selection. And I think it makes perfect sense given that both the current ADPs, they're so low right now. It feels like you're getting both these guys at the floor, and as we just mentioned, there's every possibility that takes a step forward. I mean, it's hard for it to get any worse for these guys, especially at quarterback. So, yeah, I think both are great values currently with their ADP. And as we've mentioned, Judy had a fantastic rookie season. It's been overshadowed by the fact that guys like Jefferson and Lamb had these unreal rookie seasons. But any other year, you'd say that this is a fantastic rookie season, really, for Judy. So it is a surprise that his ADP has fallen so low. Maybe it is because of those drops. But as you mentioned, Anthony, it's not a concern for me at all when it comes to the drops. Obviously, you don't want it, but I think it's definitely something that long term it can overcome. And yeah, I'd be completely shocked if his value didn't increase this time next year. And you just mentioned up at that range of wide receiver 14-ish. So someone like maybe T. Higgins, I think he should maybe in a year's time be valued somewhere around what T. Higgins is. Obviously, he's a guy that came in last year and he had a great rookie season as well. So yeah, I'm a bit surprised he's maybe not a little bit close to somebody like T. Higgins. But yeah, Anthony, fantastic selection. That's 7 out of 7. I mean, it's unheard of that we've not been able to have. We were looking forward to just maybe picking one that we could have bashed you for, but no, we're in full agreement with all of them, I think.
I didn't want to spoil the good vibes after you guys trounced Germany.
I mean, Kev tried, didn't he, with Amari Cooper, but we quickly squashed that one. We're not letting him have that one. So yeah, that's it. That brings us to the end of the show, where we've obviously looked at players that Anthony thinks currently undervalued and overvalued in Dynasty, and us three completely agree with all of his selections. So Anthony, before we let you get off, do you just want to remind the audience where they can find you, and is there anything you'd like to plug before you go?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again for having me on. It was very, very fun. I think you guys do an excellent show here, and happy to be a small part of it this week. If you want to check out my show, new episodes of my podcast, The Dynasty Drive, come out every Friday. You can follow me on Twitter at Dynasty Drive. There's no podcast this week because I need to get caught up on doing some writing, which you can find over at NFL Draft Bible. I'll have a piece coming out covering some Devy sleepers. So you can check that out over there, si.com/NFL/draft, and should have some more written work coming soon over with Fantasy Intervention. They're at joinourcircle_ on Twitter and fantasyintervention.com. But yeah, week off from the podcast this week. We're getting back to it next week, and to kind of wrap up the summer with some division preview shows. So next week will be the first one of those where we'll do the AFC East. And I'll be joined by Connor Rogers from Bleacher Report. So that'll be a good one. We got some good guests lined up for all that stuff. And yeah, right on through summer here before the games start getting played. And yeah, I appreciate you guys having me on again, though. This was fun.
No, absolutely. Kev, Ali, is there anything you want to quickly add before we go? Yeah,
just big thanks for coming on, Anthony. We've had a great time. I mean, you got your hair cut for us before.
Had to.
That was big, Paul. Obviously, you've been a cracking guest. You've got tons of charisma and knowledge, and you've gone 7 for 7 pretty much. Don't know if you've heard of an horse racing jockey, Frankie Dettori, but he won all his races on a card a few years back. So he's just gone through the card today. So that's cracking. In terms of the show itself, I think undervalued and overvalued is essentially why and how we get trades done in dynasty leagues. One player's trash is another one's treasure. And I think it's important as well to understand the difference that you might view a player in a startup to an existing league. You don't have to have the same exact thoughts on a player across startups and existing leagues. I think that Henry and Hurts picks were pure genius. I'm so low on these versus consensus. But both of these are on two of my existing contenders, and they're going to stay there. So it's just about seeing that players have got different values in different leagues and situations. You've got to make it really specific to your scenario, your league economy as such. And then the last thing would be to not get your broadband with Sky.
Love that. Just another thank you for me, Anthony, for coming on. I've absolutely loved having you on. I love your podcast.
Thank you.
So thank you. Yeah, the show followed on nicely from our last show, the Dynasty rankings debate. Dynasty works so well because of how each of us have players ranked. Someone's undervaluing of a player can create a really good buy with somebody else, and vice versa. If someone is super high and someone like Derrick Henry, then sell the player to that guy. And again, I really wanted to disagree with one or two of these picks, but I just couldn't. So they were spot on selections for me.
Yeah, and I just want to wrap it up by saying thank you again, Anthony, for coming on. It's been a great show. Everybody listening, be sure to check out Anthony's podcast. It's great. At Dynasty Drive, it's fantastic. And yeah, 7 out of 7, Anthony. I mean, it's unheard of that even Kev, you've even managed to get Kev to agree with the.
I know.
I thought Kev would be the meanest for me.
Luckily, we managed to get rid of him when he thought he might.
We booted him from the stream. Get out of here.
But no, thanks once again. It's been fantastic, and I'm looking forward to seeing everything you bring as we approach the season. It's exciting times.
Appreciate it, guys. It was a blast.
Absolutely. So thank you once again for everybody for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Wildcard. We also have this Linktree site on his Twitter page where you can find all his podcasts and shows on YouTube. So please do check it out and subscribe. And be sure to tune in next week on Thursday, the 8th of July, which will be our rookies versus veterans show. So where we're going to be looking at the difference between rookies and veterans that have quite a similar dynasty ADP. So a little bit similar to the show we've had this week. It's going to be a good one. So thanks once again, everybody, for listening, and have a good one. And we'll see you soon.
See you later.
Yeah.